Bushline Auditorium in Los Angeles. And I was there right in the front, right behind her, in the front row of the choir, as she did all these miracles and faith healings and all that. And I got to tell you, now I realize how stupid all that was, but at the time when you're in it, and you hear the organ music, and you feel it, and everybody's got their hands raised, and they're praying, and you're seeing miracles, I was thinking, who could be so blind to deny the reality of the power of God? It's just so plainly evident, right? And in this Assembly of God church, I was there for a year and a half. And I spoke in tongues. In fact, I can still speak in tongues. I'm not going to do it tonight. It's embarrassing, actually. But I can. About once a year, I'll go somewhere where nobody's around and I'll do it. And it'd be like asking me to make the sexual noises of my previous marriage. And it'd be like, but I will go outside, and you know what happens? The same stuff happens. I can go out and speak in tongues and feel this euphoria kind of thing in the brain, and it's all those old feelings come back, and then there's this like a presence right here, like a parrot presence right here in the brain. It's just like, it's not audible voice, because I wasn't like schizophrenic or anything, but and I can do it now, and I hope I'm not schizophrenic today. But there's like this kind of confirmation thing, and you get this peace, and it's just like, it is pretty amazing. And I have atheist friends who poo-poo the religious experience because they've never had one. Well, religious experiences are real. I happen to think it's like a bell curve thing. This is just my own armchair analysis. I think, whatever you want to call it, and maybe there's not a word for it yet, but let's call it a susceptibility to mysticism, right? I happen to be way over here on this end of the bell curve for that kind of stuff. And when I'm playing jazz piano on a combo, I go into that mode again. And, whoa, this is pretty neat, you know. I think there must be some drugs involved. The cerebellum must get some kind of a kick, similar to what happens when you are making love or eating chocolate or listening to music that you love. There's something that all of you probably have. You all fall somewhere across this bell curve in that. Some of you are way over here, right? And you don't know what the heck I'm talking about. Right? Some of you went to church and sat there looking around, what's everybody feeling? And I'm not. Well, I think it's just a random thing. Some of you just are never... James Randi says he's never ever felt a thing. James Randi, the magician. Richard Dawkins, he wonders what people are talking about. In fact, he even took the experiment with the God helmet thing, and he didn't feel a thing, but other people do. So you fall somewhere. Most of us fall somewhere in the middle of that, whatever you would call it. I happen to be way over here, which I don't know if that's good or bad, but that's who I am. And maybe that's part of what makes charismatic leaders, is they happen to be, you know, we put the shamans and the witch doctors kind of outside of town a bit, you know, because we let them live out there and we go to them when we need them, but, you know, they're a little bit kind of don't fit in with everybody else. So at the Pentecostal church, I was involved in faith healings and prophecy and the words of knowledge and all that, and boy, it was powerful. But then I went up from there to a church in Central California, the Standard Community Christian Center. And Standard is the name of the city, or it used to be a city. I think the city of Loggingtown is gone now. And I was there for a while, and then they sent me out as a cross-country evangelist. I spent 8 years then thinking, well, Jesus waited one more day. He didn't come, and I can still preach, driving my little Chevy Nova. I started to have a young family by then. And my wife is a singer, and we did some music together, and then I preached. And in 1975, a series of meetings fell through. We were driving around the country in Ohio, and I had a week of nothing to do, so I wrote a musical. I went down in the basement of this pastor's house, and I wrote a musical thinking when I get back to California, we'll perform it for children in the church. It'll be a nice little musical for Christmas. And I called the musical, Mary Had a Little Lamb. Now, those of you who have deep theological insight will understand the title of that, right? Do you get it? Yeah. Okay, Mary's the mother of Jesus, right? And Jesus is the Lamb of God. Get it? See? And it was supposed to be like a little thing for children, a musical, an hour-long musical. I got back to California, and a friend of mine needed some transcriptions done for some work she was doing, and I played her a couple of my songs, and she said, hey, that's good, and I think Manna Music is looking for another Christmas musical. So I went to Manna. I drove over there. I'd never been involved in the music business at all. I went over there with my penciled manuscript, and Carl Ferrer was their vice president. He was there that day. In fact, he and I are still friends. I saw him last year in Austin. He's in his 80s now, but he remembers I walked in with his penciled manuscript of a children's musical, and I put it on the piano, and he said, "Okay, let's hear your musical." I started playing the first few bars of the introduction. And then he grabbed my arm and "Stop. I can tell you right now, we're going to publish this, it's going to be good, and it's going to be one of our best sellers." So, "Well, how, you haven't heard anything?" I just started playing. I said, "I've heard enough. I've been in this business enough to know this is what we want." Besides that, we were praying to God for someone to bring in a children's musical for Christmas because we need it for our catalog and to reach the gospel. Well, they took it. They didn't change a thing. They published it as it was, and it went up, and it actually did become a bestseller for that company. They weren't the biggest Christian company at the time, but suddenly I was a Christian songwriter, and I was getting invited to then be like a conductor, guest appearance, that kind of a thing, all over the world, in different languages and all over the country. And Mary Had a Little Lamb became a good seller and a good kind of way to minister. And I thought, well, this is a great way to continue the ministry through music. Today, I'm really embarrassed at the lyrics of that musical. But the music, I'm proud of the craftsmanship. You know, there were a lot of secular musicians who wrote religious music. Did you know that? Brahms wrote a requiem. Verdi, who was an atheist, wrote a requiem. So did Berlioz. Ray Vaughan Williams, who was an atheist, wrote some of the hymns in the English hymnal. Did you know that? Some of the hymns that you sing now. And so on. But so I was proud of the craftsmanship of it, but today the lyrics, and I am actually still getting royalties from that musical. In fact, a month ago, I got a check for $1,019 from Manna Music, and it's always a surprise because the contractors, they share it and they get it kind of. So I turned it over to the Women's Medical Fund, which is a charity that helps poor women pay for abortions. And they were happy to get the money. And Katie, the bookkeeper, said, "Hey, Dan, should we send a thank you letter to Manna Music?" but that musical did really well, and so the company asked for a follow-up. They said, "Can you do something for Easter?" So I took the grandchildren or great-grandchildren of the animals in the Christmas story 33 years later, and then wrote an Easter story, and guess what I call that? His fleece was white as snow. Which, if you think about it, see, somebody laughs because your spirit is dead and you don't understand. You just don't understand deep truths like that. Jesus was the final Passover sacrifice, and the sacrifice before was supposed to be a type or a foreshadowing of the actual total sacrifice of the Son of God. And during this Passover sacrifice, the Jews were supposed to bring their cleanest animal, the one with no blemish, right? The most perfect animal. So his fleece was white as snow. Jesus never committed any sins. He didn't have to die, and yet he did give his life for the sins of the world. And that became a bestseller for that company too for a few years as well. And then I went on to write for a bunch of for Word. I wrote about 200 children's songs for other companies in that. My ministry became broader, if you know what I mean. I was still fundamentalist evangelical, but now I was getting invited to all these different types of churches and groups. And I think that was sort of a beginning. I didn't know it at the time, but it was the beginning of broadening my mind, of just noticing that the Christian community is quite broad. There is no one Christianity. I used to think my theology and my biblical understanding was the correct one, obviously. Don't we all? Don't we all think our views are the correct one, right? Our church, our family. We have the right one, and everybody else is off a little bit, or they're heretics, you know, or blasphemers or whatever. But I started bumping into different flavors of Christians, really good people. And I think Christians on the whole, just like Muslims and Jews and others, are good people. You know, they might be using their religion as an excuse for their goodness, but I think they have risen above the brutality of their own book. They've risen above the morality. They're nicer than Jesus ever was. They're nicer than the God of the Bible. And it's to their credit. We should applaud Christians who are doing good things, because they do. A lot of Christians and Jews do a lot of good things in the world, which I think is their humanistic things. But I started meeting pastors from different denominations, and sometimes it was uncomfortable because they wanted to check me out, make sure I shared their theology, you know. I remember once in, where was it, Ohio? Or somewhere, Pennsylvania. I went to this Baptist church to preach and do my music. And